Hey YouTube, how's it going? It's Quentin here and welcome to tutorial number 42. And in this tutorial, I want to take a look at forms again. So I want to continue styling my form. And right now, I'm starting from the same code that I had in the previous tutorial. So if you watch the previous tutorial, this is exactly where we ended off with our HTML. And then again, the CSS, exactly the same thing. You will notice, however, that in my browser right now, I have a slightly different form. And this is basically what I want to try and create in this tutorial. So basically, whenever you're working with a form, you kind of want to make the labels and the input elements kind of line up and get the button lining up as well. So you just want to try and get all the spacing in here is what I'm saying. You want to try and make this look a little bit more neat and tidy than some of the previous forms that we've seen in the previous tutorials. So yeah, let's take a look at how to do that. And so I'm going to hit refresh. And yeah, this is basically what we should be starting with in this tutorial. So let's go ahead and make all of those changes, right? So the first thing I want to do is jump back over to my browser. And I want to copy this entire line and paste it down here where the break tags were. So we're getting rid of those breaks. And I think wherever I see name, I'm just going to change that to password. So password and password and password and password. So yeah, basically just copied and pasted that line. And changed all the values for the attribute, the type, the name, and the ID, right? So now if we take a look at this in the browser, let's refresh. You can see that first of all, everything's now on one line, and secondly, the password styling doesn't really match the input or the text styling over here, even though they are more or less the same element, right? So let's go ahead and change that or fix that by jumping over to our CSS. And here where I have a styling rule for my text input, I can go ahead and just copy that and style the password field in exactly the same way. You simply just select password instead of an input with the type of text. You want to select the input of type password, right? Save that and yeah. Just to kind of give a quick recap, basically whenever you separate elements with a comma, it means that you can then style more than one element at a time. So we're styling our text element and we're styling our input element or our input of type password element, right? So let's come back here and refresh. And now you can see the password field and the name field pretty much look the same now. So that's cool. But I want to work on getting them to display on multiple lines or on separate lines. So one of the ways I go about doing that is by just breaking that one down one line and breaking that down one line. And I actually surround these in divs. So I'm just going to create a little bit of spacing here and then basically indent everything. And so within my form, I want to create a div. And I'm going to give that a class of row, or we can give it a class of form-row. And then below so we want to include the label and we want to include the input element. So below that input element, I'm going to close that div off, right? And I'm going to do the exact same thing for the next row. So we want to include the password label, and then I want to also include the password element. And then I'm going to end that off here, right? Then the next thing I want to do is, well, yeah, basically do the exact same thing again for the submit button, except our submit button doesn't have a label. So this is just going to be a button, and that's why it will display underneath all the labels. So let's save this now and jump back over to the browser and refresh. You can see that's looking a little bit better. Everything is on multiple lines, but there's no spacing. So to fix that up a little bit, what I'd like to do is jump back over to CSS and then select my form-row and give that a margin no, I want to give it a margin, not just a margin bottom, of 10 pixels and 0 pixels. And what that does is space it out a little bit more. But one of the things that you'll notice now is that your name field is a little bit longer or a little bit shorter than the password field. So then these two text boxes don't really line up, and that's not cool because it doesn't look very tidy. So we want to just try and get these things to line up and make them look a little bit more tidy. So the way you do that is by jumping back over to CSS, or backing over to your HTML rather. And within that div, within your div row, you want to create another div. So I'm going to go ahead and create a div over here, and we'll take that ending tag, or that ending div, and place it underneath the label, and basically push that label in one further, right? And then I want to give this a class of form dash label, right? So that is our label, and essentially I want to do the exact same thing for my input element. So let's open up another div. Over here, indent that, and then end off our div, right? So basically this is kind of what you're going for. You can copy and paste this down over the rest of the elements, and that's exactly what I'll do. But I just want to change this class from form dash label to form dash input, right? So we've got a row, then we've got a label and an input. So I'm going to save all of this now, and then I'm gonna copy everything and skip to the part where I've already done that. Alrighty, so I'm back, and basically what I've done is copied that same kind of HTML structure down to our password. So our password now has a surrounding div of form label, or the label for our password has a surrounding div of form label, and the password field has a surrounding div of form input, which is good. And you'll see I haven't actually followed through with that same HTML structure with our input button. And I think the reason for that is because if you look at this, our input button is fine where it is, right? I think below the labels, I mean, we're not going to create another label that says click the button or something like that. So I'm fine with having the button display all the way on the end underneath our labels where it is right now. Right, so if I save this HTML and I jump back over to the browser and refresh, I'm going to see a small change. So let's refresh, and you can see that basically what has happened is this input box has fell below the label, and the reason for that is obviously because we've surrounded them in divs. But what I'd like to do now is have the label and the input element display next to each other. And the way I do that is jump back over to CSS and select my elements. Now, before I select those two divs, what I'd really like to do is also add a background of red to our form row. And the reason why I'm doing this is just to kind of make it really obvious what's going on, because I'm going to be floating and clearing a few things. And so yeah, let's just save this. Jump back over to the browser, and you can see that now each of my form rows has a red background to them. So that's one row, that's another row, and that's another row. We can clearly see that. And what I'd like to do is select my form dash label, and I'm going to float that to the left, right? Left, right, okay. And then I'm going to select my form input. So basically the same thing. And I want to float that to the left. Now, something else I'd really like to do when floating these elements is to just give them a width. So I'm going to give this one a width of 20%. And then I'm going to give my form input a width of 80%, because basically when I'm floating these two things next to each other, I want the total width of both of them to equal to 100%. So 20 plus 80 is 100. And let's come back here and refresh. And now you can see quite a lot has changed. So our label and our input boxes are kind of lining up right now, but there is a slight problem because, The spacing that we had between our elements has now gone. So these two input boxes are kind of rubbing up against each other, and that's not cool. So I'd kind of like to fix the spacing over here. So one thing we can do to fix that is use something called a clear fix. And the reason why we need to use a clear fix is because we've floated our label to the left and we floated our input box to the right, but there's nothing underneath each one of these floated elements that's clearing the floated space, right? And when I spoke about floating and clearing in the previous tutorial, I kind of made mention to the fact that when you float something, you kind of need to clear it. So yeah, to fix that, I want to just make use of a clear fix. So I'm going to select my form row, and then I'm going to add a pseudo selector to this. So to create or to select a pseudo selector, we're using that double colon, and I'm going to go ahead and say after. And basically after my form row, what I'd like to do is add in some content. So let's add in a word like here. Okay. And the reason why I said, the reason why I'm using a big word like here is just to make this very obvious to you guys what's going on. So there we go, right? After each form row, I've added the text here below the form row. And what that has done is now created the spacing, or given that spacing back to us underneath each one of these form rows. But you know, that doesn't look all that good. So most of the time when people use a clear fix, they actually just put a full stop or something in here because it's a little bit less obvious. But even that, you can still see the full stop, and that kind of sucks because we don't want to see that. So yeah, basically what we want to do is set visibility equal to hidden so that we don't see that full stop. So I'm going to save this now and jump back over to the browser. So now the full stop's gone, but you can see that we still have like a little bit of extra space underneath each one of our input elements. And the reason for that is because this pseudo element, this form row after, is still taking up some height, and we want to get rid of that height, right? So I'm going to set height equal to 0, but I know for a fact that this isn't going to work unless I place display block in here as an attribute, as a styling property as well. So let's save this now and jump back over to the browser and refresh. And I broke something. What did I break? Content, visibility, hidden, height, 0 pixels, maybe? Save that. Wait. Okay, I know what I haven't done. What I haven't done is clear both. All right, and that's the entire reason I actually said that we needed to make this form element, right? So let's come back here and refresh. And now you can see what we've done is we've placed our label to this side, our input element to this side. So everything's kind of lining up. And what I'd really like to do is get rid of that background, because that is really throwing us off a little bit. So let's remove that property, save this, come back over to the browser and refresh. And now our form is looking much, much better. You can see that all of our labels kind of have a specific amount of space, which will be from here to here. And then our input elements can take up the rest of the space as needed. And then at the bottom, our submit button kind of lines up with the labels. So everything looks nice and neat and tidy. And yeah, I just want to send a shout out to my sponsors at Dev Mountain. They run a coding bootcamp with courses on iOS development, UX design, and web development, and they'll teach you everything you need to know to get a job within this field, and they'll do it within 12 weeks. So check out their website, the link is in the description below, and if you do contact them, make sure to tell them that I sent you. Special thanks to the guys whose names are on screen now. These guys contribute $5 or more on Patreon, and I really appreciate that. While you're still here, there are a few other things that you can do to help out, so follow me on social media and check out some more of my content, and I'll see you guys next time.